I'm Alex Mitchell. I'm 28 years old, and my own father drained my entire $50,000 business fund to pay off his gambling debts. Before I tell you how his entire world collapsed because of one calm sentence I said to him on the phone, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. The glow from my 3 monitors was the only light in my apartment, painting the walls in shifting shades of blue and white. It was 2 in the morning in Berlin, a city that had become my sanctuary and my crucible. Outside, the streets were silent, but in here, in the nerve center of my entire world, the only sound was the quiet click of my keyboard and the hum of overworked processors. This wasn't just an apartment. It was the headquarters of Nexus Solutions. It was also the warehouse, the server farm, and the coffee shop. It was every dollar I'd ever saved from my old software engineering job. Every weekend, I'd given up every ounce of social life I'd sacrificed for 5 long years. All of it was right here, humming on the desk in front of me. My co-founder Marcus and I, were on the brink of something real. For the first time, it wasn't just a dream fueled by caffeine and ambition. It was a tangible product, a revolutionary piece of fintech software that was ready for the main stage. In 3 weeks, I was scheduled to fly back to the States for a pitch meeting that could change our lives. It was the meeting with investors, the one that would take us from a 2-man operation running on fumes to a legitimate, funded company. $50,000 sat in our business account. The last of my savings, a few small competition winnings, and some early angel investments. It was our entire runway, meant to last us just long enough to get through that meeting and secure the seed round. The pressure was immense, a physical weight on my shoulders day and night. But it was a good pressure. The pressure that turns coal into diamonds. That's when the phone rang. It's cheerful, jarring ringtones slicing through the quiet focus of the room. I glanced at the screen. Dad, a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. He wasn't a late-night caller. Our conversations were infrequent, usually scheduled, and always felt a bit like a performance on his part. This was different. This was unscheduled. Hey, Dad, everything okay? I said, trying to keep my voice casual as I leaned back in my chair, stretching my stiff back. Hey, son. Yeah, everything's great. Super. Listen, I did something, but I don't want you to worry about it. It's not a big deal. His voice had a breezy, almost jovial quality that was 1,000 times more alarming than an outright confession. It was the voice he used when he'd done something he knew was wrong, but had already decided it was justified. The knot in my stomach turned to a cold, heavy stone. What did you do, Dad? Well, you know that business account you have, the one with the 50 grand in it. He chuckled, a dry, airy sound. Funny story. I had a few old debts that needed clearing up, so I went ahead and made use of it. Cleaned it right out. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words didn't compute. It was like he had just told me he decided to sell our family home to buy a new set of golf clubs. The sheer audacity of it was paralyzing. Alex, you there? He asked, a hint of impatience in his voice. It's gone, I managed to say. My own voice sounded distant, like it was coming from the other side of the room. Yeah, all of it. But hey, it's for the best, he said, and then came the words that would be seared into my memory forever. The words that perfectly encapsulated our entire relationship. Don't worry about it. You're a smart kid, you'll figure something out. You didn't need it anyway. You didn't need it anyway. He had just taken a wrecking ball to the foundation of my entire life, and he was telling me it was a house I didn't need. The phone felt slick in my hand. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but my voice, when it finally emerged, was a whisper of ice. I see, I said slowly, deliberately. Well, good luck with that. I hung up before he could reply. I placed the phone gently on the desk. I stared at my monitors, at the lines of code I had just been writing. They looked like a foreign language. The room was spinning, the silence roaring in my ears. For a full minute, I was completely paralyzed. Then a tremor started in my hands, a wave of pure, undiluted rage that was so intense it felt like a physical illness. I didn't shout. I didn't roar. I stood up, clenched my right fist until my knuckles were bone white, and brought it down hard on the cheap desk I'd assembled myself. The crack was sharp and violent in the stillness of the night. A network of fractures radiated out from the point of impact. I stared at the damage and my throbbing, scraped knuckles. The physical pain was a welcome distraction from the inferno in my chest. This wasn't theft. It was an assassination, an attempt to murder my future. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text message. It was from him. Don't mention this to your mother or grandfather. No need to worry them. The casual cruelty, the immediate move to conceal his crime, it was breathtaking. He wasn't just a thief. He was a coward. I saved the message. I took a picture of my broken desk. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was not a misunderstanding to be sorted out. This was a war, and he had just given me my opening salvo. Marcus was still in the zone, his headphones clamped over his ears, his fingers flying across his own keyboard. The faint beat of some obscure electronic music leaked out. For a moment, I just watched him, this brilliant, loyal friend who had thrown his lot with me, who believed in Nexus Solutions as much as I did. And I felt a fresh wave of sickness wash over me. My father hadn't just stolen from me. He had stolen from Marcus, too. I walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. He jumped slightly, then pulled off his headphones, blinking. Jesus, Alex, you move like a ninja. What's up? Figure out that API integration issue. I shook my head. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. I just pointed at the spiderweb crack on my desk. Marcus frowned. Whoa, rough night? Did the code finally fight back? He was trying for a joke, but his eyes were full of concern. My dad took the money, I said, the words finally breaking free. They sounded flat and dead in the quiet room. The business fund. All of it. It took a second for it to register. I saw the confusion in his eyes, then the dawning horror. What? No, you're kidding. That's not funny, man. I wish I were kidding, I said. I quickly explained the phone call, the casual tone my father had used, the final, dismissive, you didn't need it anyway. Marcus sank into his chair, his face pale. The whole 50,000? But how? Can he even do that? He was a co-signer on the account. I admitted, the shame of it burning in my gut. I set it up when I was 19 to deposit the winnings from that first big coding competition. The bank required a co-signer because I was so young and had no credit history. He was so proud to help me then. I never even thought to take him off. It was a piece of paper in a file. It never seemed real. So, it's legal, Marcus said, not as a question, but as a horrified statement of fact. Technically, I said, he can walk into any branch and withdraw every cent. And legally, he's just accessing his own account. Marcus shot to his feet, his calm demeanor gone, replaced by a furious energy. He started pacing the 4 feet of open floor between our desks. That's not just a loophole, Alex. That's premeditated. That's theft. We have to call the police, file a report. And what do we tell them? I asked, the bitterness rising in my throat. A man took money from an account his name is on? They'll laugh us out of the station. They'll tell us it's a civil matter, a family dispute. And by the time we get anywhere with that, Nexus will be dead and buried. He stopped pacing, his hands clenched into fists. Okay, screw him then. We focus on us. My savings. I got a little over 12,000 in my own account. It's not much, but it's something. We can stretch it. Pay the server bills, keep the lights on. It's yours. All of it. The offer was so pure, so immediate, it almost brought tears to my eyes. In a world that had just been ripped out from under me, here was this one solid, unshakable point of loyalty. And that's exactly why I had to refuse. No, I said, my voice firm. Absolutely not. I appreciate it more than you can possibly know, Marcus. But he is not taking you down with me. This is my family's toxic mess. I will not let it poison you or this company any more than it already has. It's our company, Alex, he argued, his voice full of passion. We're partners. In for a penny, in for a pound, right? And as the CEO, I'm making a decision, I said, trying for a tone of authority I didn't feel. Your money stays where it is. I'm going to handle this. I need to think. He saw the look in my eyes and finally relented, slumping back into his chair with a frustrated sigh. Just tell me what you need, man. Anything. I need to make a few calls, I said, my mind already sifting through the wreckage, looking for a piece of solid ground. The next call was a long shot, a desperate appeal to a woman who had spent decades perfecting the art of looking the other way. My mother. She and my dad were a classic case of toxic codependency. They hadn't lived together in almost a decade, but the legal ties remained. She paid the mortgage on the family home in California, the one he still lived in, while nobody was ever quite sure what he did other than rack up debts and talk about his glory days. I called her. I laid out the situation, tried to keep the raw anger and panic out of my voice, presenting it as a calm, factual crisis. Her response was a long, weary sigh. "Oh, Alex, are you absolutely certain? Your father can be careless with his words. Maybe he just meant he borrowed it. Mom, he said he used it to pay off debts and that it's gone." There was no misunderstanding. "Well, you know how he gets when he's under pressure," she said, her voice dropping into that familiar, placating tone she used whenever his behavior was indefensible. "He's not been himself lately. It's just money, Alex. He's your father. The important thing is that we don't escalate this. A big family fight is the last thing anyone needs." I felt the phone grow heavy in my hand. The sense of betrayal was a physical thing, a tightening in my chest that made it hard to breathe. It was even worse than what my father had done. He was a narcissist. I expected him to be selfish. But this was my mother telling me that my life's work, my future, was less important than avoiding an uncomfortable conversation. "He stole my future, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously low. "He stole Marcus's future. He set fire to everything I've ever worked for. And you're telling me not to make a scene?" "Don't be so dramatic," she snapped, a hint of defensiveness in her tone now. "He loves you. I'm sure he has a plan to pay it back. We just need to be patient." I couldn't listen to any more. I ended the call. No goodbye. Just silence. I sat there in the dark, the city lights of Berlin twinkling outside my window, and I had never felt so profoundly alone. My mind drifted, unbidden, to a memory from years ago. I was 16. I had discovered a passion for coding that felt like discovering a new color. There was a summer coding camp, an intensive 2-week program at a university a few hours away. It was expensive, a few $1,000s. I had saved up half, and I asked my dad if he would help with the other half. I can still picture the scene. He was in the garage, polishing his precious vintage car, a relic from a past he constantly relived. He didn't even look at me as I made my pitch. A computer camp? He'd scoffed, buffing a chrome fender. What a waste of a summer. You should be getting a real job, learning a trade, not staring at a screen all day. He'd tossed the rag into a bucket. The answer's no. Money doesn't grow on trees. A month later, my brother Tyler, who was 14, wanted to go on a ski trip with his friends. It was a last-minute thing, and it cost a fortune. I was there when Tyler asked. My dad had beamed, slapping him on the back. "Of course, champ. A man needs adventure." He'd pulled out his wallet and handed Tyler a thick wad of cash without a second thought. When I'd quietly pointed out the hypocrisy later, he'd looked at me with genuine confusion. "That's different, Alex. Skiing builds character. It's social. Your computer thing, it's isolating. I'm trying to help you, son, to make you more well-rounded." He wasn't trying to help me. He was trying to shape me into a version of my brother, a version of himself he could understand. My passion was alien to him, and so he dismissed it. That dismissal had been the story of my life. This theft wasn't a new act. It was just the logical, monstrous conclusion of a lifetime of being told my dreams didn't matter. There was only one person left to call. The one person whose respect I never had to earn because he had always given it freely. The one person my father was truly, deeply afraid of. My grandfather, William Mitchell, a retired Superior Court judge, the family patriarch, my moral compass. My hand was shaking as I dialed his number. It felt like an admission of failure that I, at 28 years old, had to run to my grandpa to solve my problems. But my mother's denial had stripped me of my pride. He answered on the second ring. His voice, even at 82, was a firm baritone. "Alex, it's past midnight your time. Is everything all right?" The dam broke. The calm, strategic facade I had been trying to maintain crumbled. I told him everything. The call, the theft, the sabotage of my dream. my mother's reaction, the memory of the coding camp. The words poured out of me in a torrent of anger and despair. I finished, and the line was silent. For a terrible, long moment, I thought he too would offer platitudes or excuses. The silence stretched on, and my heart sank. Then he spoke, and his voice was nothing like I had ever heard before. It wasn't the warm, grandfatherly voice I knew. It was the voice of a judge pronouncing sentence. It was cold, hard, and utterly furious. The unmitigated gall, he said, the words clipped and precise. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of the man. He took a deep, audible breath. This is not a mistake, Alex. This is a malignancy, a sickness of the soul that has been allowed to fester for far too long. And it stops. Today, the relief that washed over me was so intense it made me dizzy. It was validation. It was recognition. It was the law, in its purest form, finally taking my side. What do I do, Grandpa? I asked, my voice hoarse. You, he commanded, are to do two things. First, you will write down every single detail of your father's call. The time, the date, his exact words. You will save his text message. You are building a case. Second, you will put this out of your mind as best you can and focus entirely on your investor presentation. You will not be defeated by this. Do you understand me? Yes, sir, I said. Good. Now, you let me handle the family, he continued. I'm calling a meeting, an emergency session. Your Aunt Sarah and Uncle Robert will be there. Your mother and Tyler will be required to attend, and you will be present via video. We're going to shine a light on this darkness, and we're going to excise it from his family once and for all. He paused, and I could practically feel the temperature drop. Gregory, however, is not invited to his own trial. The video call connected, and my laptop screen fractured into a mosaic of tense faces. It was like watching the opening scene of a family drama I never want to star in. My grandfather's study in California was the setting, a room that always smelled of old leather and justice. It was a room where I'd receive praise for good grades and gentle counsel for boyhood mistakes. Today, it was a courtroom. My grandfather, William, was the presiding judge, seated at his large oak desk. He wore a simple cardigan, but he might as well have been in his black judicial robes. His posture was ramrod straight, his face a mask of grim determination. To his right, my Aunt Sarah, my father's sister, sat with a leather-bound notepad and a pen that looked like a weapon. Her lawyer face was on, a look of focused intensity that had made CEOs tremble. Beside her, her husband, Uncle Robert, the family's financial guru, had already filled a page of a yellow legal pad with notes. He adjusted his glasses, his brow furrowed in concentration. The defense table, so to speak, was on the other side. My mother, Eleanor, looked small and fragile in her armchair, her gaze fixed on a point somewhere on the Persian rug. She was wringing her hands, a nervous habit I hadn't seen in years. And next to her, my brother Tyler. He was the picture of defiance, arms crossed tightly over his chest, a thunderous scowl on his face. He wouldn't look at me, his pixelated face on a laptop screen. He was there as his father's proxy, his loyal soldier. Thank you all for attending on such short notice, William began. His voice was calm, but it held an underlying authority that commanded the room. There would be no small talk. We are here to address a grievous act committed by one member of this family against another. Alex, he said, turning his piercing gaze toward the laptop, I want you to tell everyone, in your own words, exactly what transpired 2 nights ago. I took a steadying breath, my own face looking back at me from a small window on the screen. I felt a million miles away, a ghost in the machine. I recounted the story, sticking to the facts. The late-night call, the nonchalant confession, the $50,000, the gambling debts, the impending investor meeting that now hung by a thread. I finished with his exact, soul-crushing words, "We didn't need it anyway." A thick, heavy silence blanketed the study. Uncle Robert scribbled furiously. Aunt Sarah's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jump. My mother closed her eyes, as if she could make it all disappear. Tyler broke the silence, his voice laced with indignation. This is ridiculous. It's a family matter. Why are we treating Dad like a criminal? There has to be more to the story. I'm sure he was going to pay it back. Alex is probably overreacting. Overreacting? I shot back, my own anger flaring despite my best efforts to stay calm. He emptied my company's bank account, Tyler. We have 3 weeks of runway left, maybe. Is that an overreaction? Maybe he was trying to teach you a lesson. Tyler retorted. Maybe he thought your little startup was a bad investment, and he was trying to protect you. Protect me by stealing from me? I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense if you actually think Dad cares about you. Enough. William's voice boomed, silencing us both instantly. He fixed Tyler with a glare that could melt steel. Your loyalty to your father is noted, Tyler. But in this room, we deal in facts, not feelings. The fact is $50,000 is gone. He then turned his gaze to my mother. Eleanor, your thoughts? My mother flinched, looking up. Her voice was barely a whisper. I think this is all a terrible misunderstanding. Gregory has been under so much pressure. If we just talk to him calmly. We are past that point, Aunt Sarah interjected, her voice sharp and clear. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a pattern. She turned to me on the screen. Alex, did he give you any indication this was coming? None, I said. I thought everything was fine. It was then that Aunt Patricia, my dad's other sister, who was on a separate video call from her home in Arizona, cleared her throat. She was a gentle woman, a schoolteacher who normally avoided conflict at all costs. She looked pale and distressed. He did it again, she said, her voice trembling. I can't believe he did it again. William turned to her, his expression softening slightly. Patricia? What are you talking about? It was about 10 years ago, she began, her eyes filling with tears. My kids, Jake and Emma, were getting ready for college. I had saved up about $20,000 for their tuition. It was everything I had. Gregory came to me. He was so charming, so convincing. He had this surefire real estate investment, a can't-miss opportunity. He said he could double my money in a year. She paused, taking a shaky breath. I was a single mother. I was struggling. The idea of doubling that money, it was like a dream. So I gave it to him. I trusted him. He's my brother. Her voice broke. I never saw a single dollar of it again. For years, he just fed me excuses. The market turned, there were delays, paperwork issues. It was always something, and I was too embarrassed, too ashamed of my own stupidity to tell anyone. Especially you, Dad, she whispered, looking at my grandfather. I didn't want you to know I'd been so foolish. The confession landed in the room with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was a prequel. It was a history of predatory behavior. I looked at Tyler's face on the screen. The defiant anger was gone, replaced by a sick, dawning horror. His mouth was slightly open. I could see him reevaluating every story, every defense he'd ever made for our father. He was looking at Aunt Patricia not as a hysterical woman, but as another victim. Uncle Robert finally spoke, his voice grim and heavy. He held up his legal pad. The pieces are starting to fit together in a very ugly way, he said. Alex, you sent me the last 6 months of your bank statements. I noticed something you probably missed. There were smaller withdrawals before the big one. $500 here, $1,000 there, all from ATMs near casinos in Southern California and Nevada. He was using your business account as his personal piggy bank for months. He then looked at my grandfather. William, this is difficult to say, but for the last few years, some of your old friends from the country club have approached me with strange questions. They'd asked me my opinion on exclusive, high-yield investment vehicles that Gregory was offering them. They said he was managing a private fund for a select group of friends and family. I always warned them to be careful, but I dismissed it as Greg just puffing himself up, trying to sound important. He put his pen down. I don't think he was just puffing himself up. A large, desperate withdrawal from Alex's account in Vegas. A history of siphoning funds. Patricia's story of a fake investment. The private fund he's been running for your elderly friends. He took a deep breath. I can't be certain without a full investigation, but my professional opinion is that we are not looking at a man with a gambling problem. We're looking at a man running a Ponzi scheme. The words echoed in the silence. Ponzi scheme. It was an accusation so vile, so far beyond a simple family betrayal, that it seemed to suck the air out of the room. My mother let out a strangled gasp, finally covering her face with her hands as the full, monstrous truth of the man she was still legally tied to crash down upon her. Tyler just stared blankly, his face ashen. The golden image of his father had been irrevocably shattered. The meeting concluded not with a resolution, but with a battle plan. Aunt Sarah would draft an official legal demand letter, not just for my $50,000, but for Patricia's $20,000 plus interest, and she would begin the process of subpoenaing his financial records. Uncle Robert would start discreetly contacting the other potential victims, a task he clearly dreaded. My mother, her voice shaking but firm for the first time, looked directly at Aunt Sarah. "Sarah, I need to hire you for something else," she said. "I want to file for divorce." Immediately, as my grandfather ended the call, my apartment in Berlin felt colder than ever. The scope of my father's deceit was breathtaking. He wasn't just a flawed man who made mistakes. He was a predator, hiding in plain sight, using his family name as a shield while he devoured the people who trusted him most. My personal crisis had just become a federal crime scene, and I was witness number one. In the wake of the family meeting, a strange and terrible quiet descended. It was the quiet of the eye of a hurricane. I knew the storm was still raging all around me, back in California, but in my Berlin apartment, all I could do was work. I threw myself into the Nexus presentation with a feverish intensity, coding for 18 hours a day, fueled by cheap coffee and a burning need to control the one thing I still could, my work. But the real world has a way of battering down the door. The storm found me. It started with an email from Richard Chun, my would-be lead investor. The subject line was simply, "Urgent. Alex," the email read, "I need to speak with you immediately. I'm hearing some very disturbing chatter about Nexus. Call me." My blood ran cold. Chatter. The word was like a snake. I called him instantly. His voice was clipped, professional, and devoid of all its previous warmth. "Alex," he said, cutting straight to the point, "I can't be associated with this. My partners are spooked. We're a conservative fund. The whiff of any kind of financial scandal, especially a family one, is toxic. It suggests instability in leadership." "Richard, it's a personal matter," I pleaded, my voice tight. "It has nothing to do with the company's fundamentals. The tech is solid, the plan is solid, you know that. I know that you have a 3-week runway in a crisis that is now public knowledge in certain circles," he retorted. "I'm sorry, Alex. We're out. The deal is off the table. Good luck." He hung up, just like that. The cornerstone of my entire plan was gone. I felt a wave of nausea, so intense I had to grip the edge of my desk. He said public knowledge. How? Who? My mind raced. The only people who knew were on that call. No one on that call would leak this. Not my grandfather, not my aunts or uncle, not Marcus, not my mother or Tyler in their current state of shock. That only left one person, the source of the poison himself. I spent the next few hours scouring the internet, diving into the murky corners of tech forums and gossip blogs. And then I found it, an anonymous post on a site known for its industry rumors. The post was artfully written, full of plausible deniability. It spoke of a once promising fintech founder whose well-known father, a high-stakes gambler, had allegedly misappropriated company funds, putting the entire enterprise on the brink of collapse. It was him. I knew it in my bones. The well-known gambler line was his signature, a way of painting himself as a tragic, roguish figure rather than a common thief. He was trying to create a self-fulfilling prophecy. He was telling the world my company was doomed, ensuring that it would be. If I failed, it wouldn't be his fault. It would be proof that my dream was flawed from the start, that he had been right about me all along. It was the most narcissistic, twisted form of "I told you so" I could possibly imagine. To make matters worse, I saw the post had been shared on LinkedIn, and one of the people who had shared it was Olivia Pearson, my ex-girlfriend from my university days, now a rising star at a rival company. Her comment was a dagger, a cautionary tale for all VCs. The character of a founder is the most important asset. Do your diligence. She was dancing on my company's grave before it was even dug. She wasn't the source, but she was a megaphone for the poison. The weight of it all was crushing. I had no money, no lead investor. My reputation was in tatters. For the first time, I felt a flicker of genuine despair. Maybe he was right. Maybe I couldn't do this. That evening, as I was staring blankly at a screen full of useless code, there was a hesitant knock on my apartment door. I ignored it. It came again, softer this time. Annoyed, I got up and swung the door open. It was Tyler. He looked like a ghost. His face was pale and gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't shaved. He was holding a crumpled, overstuffed manila folder. He looked nothing like the cocksure golden child from the family meeting. He looked broken. "Can I come in?" he asked. His voice was hoarse. I was too shocked to say no. I just stepped aside and let him pass. He walked into the center of the room and stood there for a moment, looking at the cracked desk, the whiteboard covered in algorithms, the controlled chaos of my life. "He's a monster," Tyler whispered, not looking at me. I thought he was just flawed, a bit of a rogue, larger than life. But he's just a monster. "What happened?" I asked, my anger toward him softening in the face of his obvious pain. "I went to the house," he said, finally meeting my eyes. His were red-rimmed. I had to see for myself. I confronted him. I asked him about Aunt Patricia. He just laughed it off, said she was being dramatic. He was so smooth, so convincing. I almost believed him, Alex. God help me, I wanted to believe him. He clutched the folder to his chest. Then he left to go run some errands. I knew where he kept the key to his office desk. I've never gone in there. It was his private kingdom. I felt like I was desecrating a tomb. "What did you find?" He held out the folder. "This." My hands trembled slightly as I took it from him. It was heavy, filled with papers. I opened it. The contents were a roadmap to my father's secret life. There were statements from credit cards I never knew he had, all maxed out. There were threatening letters from loan sharks. There were printouts of stock portfolios for his clients, clearly faked on a home computer. And then I saw it, tucked in the back. A formal life insurance proposal, dated 3 weeks ago. A $2 million policy. On the life of William Mitchell, with Gregory Mitchell listed as the sole beneficiary. I had to sit down. I felt like I couldn't breathe. He was planning for my grandfather's death. He came back while I was in there, Tyler said, his voice choking. I hid in the closet. He was on the phone, Alex. He was yelling at someone, some bookie, I think. And I heard him say it. He said, "Don't worry about the money. I've got a news source. The kid's little tech fund. It's about time he contributed something to this family besides disappointment." Tyler started to cry then, not loud sobs, but a quiet, hopeless weeping. And then he said he was doing you a favor. He told the guy on the phone, "I'm saving him from himself. He thinks he's a genius, but that whole tech world is a fantasy. He was going to lose it all anyway. This way, at least the money goes to good use." He looked up at me, his face a mask of agony and shame. He wasn't trying to protect me or himself. He was trying to destroy you. Because he couldn't stand the thought of you succeeding. Because you were building something real, and all he's ever done is tear things down. He took a ragged breath. All these years, I chose his side. I defended him. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I'm so sorry." He was no longer my rival. He was no longer the golden child. In that moment, he was just my little brother, waking up to the nightmare that I'd been living in for years. I walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. There was nothing I could say that could fix the damage, but for the first time in our lives, we were truly on the same side. The folder he brought me wasn't just a collection of documents. It was a weapon. It was the truth, undeniable and ugly. And it was exactly the ammunition I needed. The next morning, my despair was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I called my grandfather. I told him everything. The sabotage from my father, the investor pulling out, and Tyler's horrific discovery. The silence on the other end of the line was the heaviest I had ever known. "The man is irredeemable," William said finally, his voice shaking with a quiet fury. "He is a ghoul, waiting for me to die." He took a moment to compose himself. "All right, Alex. Forget Richard Shun. He is a sheep. You cannot build an empire with sheep. You need a lion." "Who, Grandpa?" I asked, my heart starting to pound again, but but this time with a sliver of hope. "Howard Barnes," he said. "He runs one of the most powerful VC funds in the Valley. He is brilliant, ruthless, and he does not suffer fools. We served in the Army together a lifetime ago. We are not close friends, but there's a bond there, a respect." He paused. "Getting a meeting will be a miracle, but I will call in the only favor I have ever asked of him. But I am warning you, Alex. Howard will see right through you. You will have one shot. Do not miss it." The call from my grandfather felt like a summons from another world. "Howard will see you," he'd said, his voice laced with a gravity that underscored the impossibility of what he had just achieved. He was not pleased. His exact words were, "Bill, out of respect for our history, I will give the boy 15 minutes. But if I get even a whiff of personal drama affecting the integrity of the business, the meeting is over." He's in San Francisco. Next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Be there. The words hung in the air. A 15-minute audience with a kingmaker. It was both a golden ticket and a death sentence. I booked the flight, the charge on my credit card feeling like a desperate gamble. Marcus and I entered a state of suspended animation. We didn't sleep. We worked. We tore the presentation apart and rebuilt it from the ground up, anticipating every conceivable question, every possible objection. We ran financial models until my eyes burned. The manila folder Tyler had given me sat on the corner of my desk, a silent, potent observer. It was my secret weapon, my ace in the hole. The night before my flight to the States, the knock on my apartment door was so heavy it seemed to shake the frame. It wasn't a hesitant tap. It was a demand. I didn't need to look through the peephole. I knew the specific frequency of his arrogance. I opened the door to find my father, Gregory, standing in the dim hallway of my Berlin building. The transatlantic flight had not been kind to him. His expensive suit was creased, his face was a pasty, haggard mask, and his eyes held the wild, cornered look of an animal. "We need to have a talk," he said, his voice a low growl as he tried to shoulder his way inside. I didn't move. I planted my feet and blocked the entrance with my body. "No, we don't. You need to leave. Now." His face, already pale, flushed a dark, mottled red. "Don't you dare take that tone with me," he hissed, jabbing a finger toward my face. "I am your father. And you have poisoned this family against me. Your mother, your own mother, is divorcing me. Sarah is sending letters threatening to ruin me. And it's all because of you and your selfish little tantrum over a loan." The absurdity of the word loan was so profound it was almost funny. "A loan," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "You drain my company's lifeblood, you sabotage my reputation, you try to murder my future, and you call it a loan?" His carefully constructed facade of the aggrieved victim shattered. Raw, undiluted narcissism poured out. "I did it for you," he roared, spittle flying from his lips. "You ungrateful, arrogant child. I saved you. I saved you from yourself." I just stood there, a silent wall, letting his poison spray against me without effect. My lack of reaction seemed to infuriate him even more. "This fantasy world you live in," he raged, his arms waving wildly. "This nonsense with computers and code and imaginary money on a screen. It's not real, Alex. It's a game. I've been in the real world. I've seen dozens of hotshots like you with their brilliant ideas. They all end up broken. They all come crawling back for a real job. I was trying to spare you that humiliation. I was trying to give you a chance at a real life." The confession was so pure in its delusion that it was almost beautiful. He wasn't just making an excuse. He believed it. In his warped reality, he was the hero of this story, the wise father saving his naive son from a terrible mistake. My success was an existential threat to his worldview, so he had to preemptively destroy it to prove it was never real to begin with. "You need to leave, Dad," I said again. My voice was flat, empty. I felt nothing for him. Not love, not hate. Just a vast, cold emptiness. He saw in my eyes. He saw that the buttons he had been pushing my entire life were no longer connected to anything. The rage collapsed, replaced by a desperate, wheedling plea. "Alex, please," he whimpered, his face crumbling. "Son, just call them. Call your grandfather. Tell him it was all a misunderstanding. We can fix this. We're family. I'm still your father. I looked at him, at this shell of a man standing in a drab hallway a continent away from the wreckage he'd caused. No, I said, my voice soft but absolute. You're just a man whose name happens to be on my birth certificate. We have nothing more to say. I closed the door gently in his face, shutting out his shocked expression. I leaned my back against it, my heart pounding a steady, powerful rhythm. It wasn't fear. It was the drumbeat of liberation. The next day, I was in a different universe. A boardroom on the 40th floor of a glass tower in San Francisco. The view of the bay was breathtaking, but the atmosphere inside was suffocating. Howard Barnes sat at the head of a granite table that seemed a mile long. He was flanked by two partners, a man and a woman, both with the predatory stillness of sharks. Howard himself was eagle-like, his sharp eyes missing nothing, his posture radiating an intimidating aura of power and impatience. My grandfather, William Mitchell, sends his regards, I said, my voice sounding impossibly small in the cavernous room as I set up my laptop. Bill is a good man from a different era, Howard replied, his voice a clipped, no-nonsense bark. His respect for you is the only reason this meeting is happening. You have 15 minutes. The clock is running. Go. I took a breath and plunged in. I moved through the presentation with a crisp, focused energy. I laid out the architecture of Nexus Solutions, the elegance of our security protocols, the size of the addressable market, our 5-year roadmap to profitability. I was passionate. I was prepared. I knew this business better than I knew myself. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see the partners exchanging impressed glances. But Howard's face remained a stony, unreadable mask. I reached my final slide. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions. The silence that followed was terrifying. It stretched for what felt like an eternity. Howard finally spoke. The tech is impressive. The market analysis is sound. He paused, leaning forward slightly. But I have a problem. I've been making some calls, and I've heard rumors. Unsubstantiated, perhaps, but persistent. Rumors about financial irregularities, about instability in your leadership, about a family situation. His eyes narrowed into slits. Talk to me about that. This was it, the moment of truth. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I matched his gaze. I'm glad you brought that up, Howard, I said, my voice ringing with a confidence I didn't know I possessed. I reached into my briefcase, my hand steady, and pulled out the thick, meticulously organized binder. I slid it across the vast granite table. It moved like a puck on ice, coming to a stop directly in front of him with a solid, definitive thud. I believe in radical transparency, I stated. Nexus Solutions was recently the target of a hostile financial action. The partners looked at each other, their eyebrows raised. Howard didn't move a muscle. He just slowly opened the binder. You'll find a comprehensive overview of the situation in there. I continued, my voice now in complete command. Tab A is the certified bank statement showing an unauthorized $50,000 withdrawal by a co-signer on the account, my father. Tab B is a copy of the official legal demand for repayment, which was sent to him by my attorney. Tab C is the signed repayment agreement, in which he concedes the debt. I let him turn a few pages, his sharp eyes scanning the documents. Tab D contains documented evidence of his subsequent attempts to actively sabotage the company by leaking false and malicious rumors to industry publications in an effort to trigger the very instability he claimed to be worried about. And Tab E, I said, my voice dropping slightly, is a preliminary financial analysis from a certified advisor outlining a pattern of behavior that suggests my father has been misappropriating funds from other family members and associates for more than a decade. I leaned back, my part done. The rumors you heard, Howard, are correct. There is instability in my life, but it is not in my leadership. I identified this crisis. I isolated it. I took decisive legal action to contain it, and I firewalled it from the company's operations, all while continuing to lead my team and develop our product. The binder in front of you is not the story of a problem. It's the story of a solution. Dead silence. The only sound was the faint rustle of paper as Howard turned another page. His partners were staring at me, their jaws practically on the granite tabletop. They had come expecting to see a kid with a good idea. They were looking at a wartime general. Howard slowly closed the binder. He placed both hands flat on top of it. He looked up, and for the first time, the stony mass cracked. A flicker of something, respect, surprise, amusement, danced in his eyes. "I see 100 pitches a year," he said, his voice now a low, conversational rumble. "Everyone's got an idea. Everyone's got a PowerPoint. They tell me about their strengths. They never tell me about their weaknesses." He tapped the binder. "You just handed me your greatest weakness, gift-wrapped, and you showed me how you turned it into a weapon." He stood up, a towering figure of authority. "I don't invest in ideas, Alex. Ideas are cheap. I invest in founders." He looked from me to his stunned partners and back again. A slow, wolfish grin spread across his face. "A founder who can walk through this kind of personal hell and not only survive, but strategize, document, and execute. A founder who has the guts to put a binder like this on my desk." He extended his hand across the table. "That's a founder I will bet on every single time. Welcome to the fund, son. Now, let's go make you so successful your father's name becomes a footnote in your story." The handshake with Howard Barnes was more than a deal. It was a paradigm shift. The news of his fund's investment in Nexus Solutions sent a seismic shock through the niche world of fintech startups. Howard didn't just invest, he endorsed. His backing was a shield and a sword. Suddenly, I wasn't the kid with the family problems. I was Howard Barnes's new protege. The fallout was immediate and deeply satisfying. Richard Chun, the investor who had so coldly cut me loose, sent me a fawning email talking about how he always believed in my vision and would be honored to reconsider a partnership. I had Marcus draft a polite 2-sentence rejection. It felt like exorcising a ghost. But the real consequences, the ones that truly mattered, were unfolding back in California. My father's carefully constructed world of smoke and mirrors was being dismantled piece by piece. Aunt Sarah called me a week later, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in her voice. It was the sound of a lawyer who not only had the law on her side, but the righteous fury of a wronged sister. "He's putting up a fight," she said, "but it's the pathetic, desperate kind. He hired some bottom-feeder lawyer from a strip mall who sent me a long, rambling letter. It was a work of art, really. It claimed the $50,000 was a gift that I was mischaracterizing as a loan, and that my client was causing him extreme emotional distress with these baseless accusations." "What did you do?" I asked, picturing the letter in my mind. "I FedExed him back a package," she said. It contained a single copy of the signed repayment agreement he'd already agreed to, with a sticky note on it that just said, "Oops, you forgot this." His lawyer called me an hour later to say his client would be adhering to the payment schedule. He's being forced to sell the rental property he had in Palm Springs, the one none of us knew about. The proceeds will cover your $50,000 and Patricia's $20,000, plus 10 years of interest for her. He is, to use a technical legal term, completely screwed. The next domino to fall was my mother. She called me not in tears, but with a voice I hadn't heard in years. A voice that was clear, steady, and free. "The papers are final, Alex," she said. "The divorce is done. The judge signed off this morning." She told me about the proceedings, about how my father had tried to argue for ownership of the family home, the one she had been paying the mortgage on for 2 decades. His lawyer tried to argue that he was entitled to half, plus alimony. Then Sarah presented the evidence from Robert's investigation, the Ponzi scheme, the hidden debts. The judge looked at your father and said, "Mr. Mitchell, you are lucky you are not leaving this courtroom in handcuffs." He got nothing. He has 30 days to vacate the house. I felt a huge weight lift, not for me, but for her. "How are you feeling, Mom?" "I feel light," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Like I've been carrying a heavy coat around for 30 years, and I just realized I could take it off. Thank you, Alex, for being strong enough to force us all to see the truth." The full, ugly truth of my father's dealings came from Uncle Robert a few days after that. He had spent weeks talking quietly with my grandfather's friends, the elderly men from the country club who had been victims of the private fund. "It was a masterclass in manipulation," Robert explained, his voice filled with a mixture of disgust and professional curiosity. He didn't just take their money. He befriended them. He'd take them to lunch, listen to their stories about their grandkids, build this deep well of trust. He leveraged your grandfather's name, of course. Bill would want me to look after you, he'd say. He preyed on their loneliness as much as their finances. Did they get their money back? I asked. Every cent, Robert said. William insisted on it. He liquidated a huge chunk of his own portfolio and paid them all back himself, with interest. He made them sign non-disclosure agreements to protect their own privacy and dignity. He told them, "The Mitchell family pays its debts." It nearly wiped him out, Alex. But he said his honor was more important than his portfolio. The scale of my grandfather's integrity was humbling. He was willing to sacrifice his own financial security to clean up the mess his son had made, to protect the good name he had spent a lifetime building. Meanwhile, the text messages from my father continued to arrive, each one more desperate than the last. The angry bluster was gone, replaced by a pathetic, cloying sentimentality. "I know I made mistakes, son, but a boy needs his father. Can't we talk? I'm getting help. I'm a different person now. Please give me a chance. Your success is my success. I'm so proud of you. Let me be a part of it." I never replied. It was like listening to a recording of a language I no longer spoke. He wasn't changing. He was just trying a new key in a lock that no longer existed. He didn't want forgiveness. He wanted access. Access to my success, access to my status, a way to rebuild his shattered image by clinging to mine. The final, pathetic confirmation of his downfall came from Marcus. He was scrolling through a Vegas gossip site one afternoon, laughing. "Dude, you have to see this." He turned his screen toward me. It was a short column about the changing social scene. It mentioned my father by name, Gregory Mitchell, as a former high roller whose luck appears to have officially run out. It included a picture of his young girlfriend, Vanessa Reed, now on the arm of a new benefactor, a tech billionaire. The caption was brutal. "It seems Mitchell's credit line has dried up, and so has his companionship." I looked at the photo. My father, with his fake tan and forced smile, a ghost from a life that was a complete and utter fraud. He had lost everything, not just the money and the house and the family. He had lost his audience. And for a narcissist like my father, an empty theater is a fate worse than death. 2 years later, the person who looked back at me in the mirror was someone I barely recognized from the frantic, terrified young man in the Berlin apartment. The anxiety that had been a constant companion was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that came not from arrogance, but from experience. I had walked through fire and discovered I wasn't flammable. The world of Nexus Solutions had transformed just as profoundly. Our headquarters was no longer my spare room, but 3 floors of a gleaming high-rise in the heart of San Francisco's financial district. The view from my corner office looked out over the Bay Bridge, a constant reminder of connection and engineering, of building things that last. We had a team of over 100 brilliant people, and our London office was rapidly expanding. The company wasn't just surviving, it was a leader in the industry. The greatest transformation, however, sat in the office next to mine. Tyler was our head of product development, and he was, without a doubt, the most talented person in his field I had ever worked with. The journey from the broken young man in my Berlin apartment to the confident executive he was today had been a quiet, steady climb. After the family implosion, he had thrown himself into his studies, channeling all his guilt and confusion into a ferocious work ethic. He graduated at the top of his class and applied for an entry-level internship at Nexus like any other candidate. I was hard on him, harder than on anyone else, because I had to be. He never complained. He just put his head down and worked, his natural talent shining through. He rose through the ranks on pure merit, earning the respect of every single person on our team. Our conversations were no longer about our father or the past. They were about UI/UX design, development sprints, and market strategy. We had found our way back to being brothers, not by forgetting the past, but by building a new future together, one line of code at a time. One afternoon, we were in a conference room, staring at a whiteboard covered in complex diagrams. We were stuck on a critical design flaw in our next-generation platform. The latency is still too high in the authentication handshake, I said, running a hand through my hair in frustration. We can't push it to beta like this. Tyler was silent for a long moment, just staring at the board. Then he picked up a marker. We're thinking about it backwards, he said. We're trying to force the user through our security funnel. What if we bring the funnel to the user? He started drawing a new diagram, a completely different approach that was so elegant and so obvious in retrospect that I could only laugh. That's brilliant, I said. That's absolutely brilliant. He just smiled, capping the marker. That's what you pay me for, boss. In that easy moment of collaboration, of shared purpose, I felt a sense of peace that no amount of financial success could ever buy. We had rebuilt our relationship from the ground up, on a foundation of mutual respect. That sense of peace was tested one last time. We were hosting a large party at a chic art gallery to celebrate the company's 3rd anniversary. The place was buzzing, filled with the brightest minds in Silicon Valley, investors, engineers, journalists. I was deep in a conversation with a reporter from the Wall Street Journal when I heard a voice cut through the sophisticated chatter. It was a voice I hadn't heard in person in years, yet was as familiar as a scar. That's my boy. He gets that big brain from his old man. I turned, and there he was, my father. He was standing near the entrance, holding a glass of champagne he had clearly helped himself to. He was thinner, and his expensive suit seemed to hang off him. But the desperate, practiced smile was the same. He was trying to bask in the reflected glow of my success, to claim a piece of it for himself. A ripple of silence spread out from where he stood. People were turning, whispering, recognizing the awkwardness of the situation. This was a final, public test of my boundaries. I felt a surge of, not anger, not even annoyance, just a deep, weary pity. He was a ghost at the feast, a man so desperate for relevance he had to crash a party to feel seen. I excused myself from the reporter and walked toward him. I didn't rush. I just moved through the crowd with a calm purpose. As I approached, he beamed, raising his glass as if we were co-hosts. "Great party, son. We should do this more often," he said loudly. I stopped a few feet from him and gave him a small, polite, professional smile. "Dad," I said, my voice quiet but firm, audible only to him and those standing closest. "It's a surprise to see you, but this is a private event for our team and our partners. You're not on the list." It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't an attack. It was a simple statement of fact. You do not belong here. The smile on his face faltered, the light in his eyes dimming. He opened his mouth to protest, to perhaps cause the scene he craved, but he never got the chance. 2 figures appeared silently at his elbows. It was Tyler and Aunt Sarah. They didn't touch him. They just stood there, a calm, solid wall of familial unity. "Greg," Sarah said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "It's time to go. I'll call you a cab." He looked at my face, saw no weakness. He looked at Tyler's, saw no sympathy. He looked at Sarah's, saw no negotiation. He was completely and utterly powerless. The fight went out of him. He just gave a small, defeated nod, put his champagne glass down on a nearby table, and allowed them to walk him to the door. He didn't cause a scene. He just vanished back into the irrelevance for which he had come. A few months later, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, a registered letter arrived at my office. It was from a law firm in Southern California. I opened it with a strange lack of curiosity. Inside was a cashier's check. It was the final payment on the schedule Aunt Sarah had forced upon him. The debt was officially paid. Tucked into the envelope with the check was a small, square piece of notepaper, folded in half. His handwriting was spidery and thin. It contained a single, desperate question. "Now, can we be family again?" I read the note. I looked at the check, the final closing of a painful chapter. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No anger. No forgiveness. It was like reading a memo about a resolved accounting error. I walked over to the large filing cabinet where we kept the company's foundational documents. I opened the drawer labeled Emptied. I pulled out the file for Nexus Solutions Incorporated formation. Inside was the original bank statement from 5 years ago, the one showing the $50,000 withdrawal. I took the check and the pathetic little note, clipped them to that old statement, and placed them back in the file. I closed the drawer. The sound of it clicking shut was the only sound in my office. It wasn't a memory to be forgotten. It was just a part of the company's history now. The price of admission, the cost of being free. The setting sun cast a golden path across the Pacific, the light flooding the restaurant perched on the cliffs of Big Sur. It was a perfect California evening. The table was filled with the quiet hum of happy conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the easy laughter of people who genuinely loved each other. We were celebrating, not just another successful quarter, but something much bigger. That morning, Nexus Solutions had gone public. Our ticker symbol now scrolled across the bottom of every financial news network in the world. And I was surrounded by my family, my real family. My grandfather, William, sat at the head of the table. He was 84 now, and frielier than he used to be, but his eyes were as clear and sharp as ever. He watched the scene with a deep, contented satisfaction. My mother, Eleanor, sat beside her husband, David, the kind art professor who had brought a gentle joy back into her life. She looked radiant, her face free from the lines of worry that had been etched there for so long. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Robert were arguing happily about market valuations, while Marcus and his wife were showing off pictures of their new baby. And next to me sat Tyler. He raised his glass to me in a silent toast, a gesture of shared victory that needed no words. He was no longer just my brother or my colleague. He was my partner in the truest sense of the word. In a quiet moment, my mother leaned over to me, her voice a soft murmur under the gentle buzz of the restaurant. "I got a call last week," she said, "from Gregory." I didn't tense up. I didn't feel a flicker of the old anger. I just nodded, waiting. What did he want? "The usual," she said with a small, sad smile. "He saw the news about the IPO. He wanted me to tell you how proud he was. He wanted me to ask if you'd be willing to talk to him now. He said he knows he made mistakes, but he's a changed man." She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "He asked me if I thought you had finally forgiven him." I considered the question. Forgiveness. It was a word people used all the time, but what did it really mean? Did it mean pretending the past hadn't happened? Did it mean letting a toxic person back into your life? I thought about the man who had tried to destroy me, not with a gun or a knife, but with a casual, dismissive phone call. I thought about the years of being made to feel small, of having my passions belittled. And I thought about the man I had become, not in spite of him, but because of the space he had created when he finally revealed his true nature. "I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, Mom," I said honestly. "It doesn't feel angry anymore. It just feels distant, like a story about someone else. I don't wish him ill. I just don't wish him anything at all. I'm not chained to it anymore. I'm free." My grandfather must have overheard, because he chose that moment to stand, his movements slow but deliberate, and tap his glass for a toast. "A long time ago," he began, his voice carrying the familiar weight of judicial authority, "I learned that a person's legacy is not just what they build. It is what they protect. It is the principles they refuse to compromise." He looked around the table, at the faces of the people he loved. His eyes finally settled on me. There are men in this world who believe that power comes from control. They believe that if they can take something from you, your money, your confidence, your dream, they can own a piece of your soul. They think that by making you dependent, they make you weak. He raised his glass, his hand remarkably steady. A fierce, unyielding pride shone in his eyes. "Your father thought that by taking your money, he would forever chain you to his failures. But he made a catastrophic miscalculation. The only thing he managed to take was the chain itself." He smiled, a genuine, brilliant smile. "He didn't trap you, Alex. He set you free." To my grandson, the table erupted in a chorus of "to Alex." As I lifted my own glass, meeting the eyes of the people who truly mattered, I looked out at the vast, endless expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The sun had finally slipped below the horizon, but had left the sky painted in the brilliant colors of a new dawn. My grandfather was right. My father hadn't stolen my future. He had given it to me in the most painful and liberating way imaginable. He had shown me the cage I never knew I was in, and in his desperate attempt to lock the door, he had accidentally handed me the key. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever had a moment in your life that felt like a catastrophe at the time, but ended up being the thing that set you free? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.